All right, dads, welcome back to another episode of the Daddiest Project podcast. Today, we are going to be interviewing a dad who had the unfortunate experience of losing his best friend to suicide, and we're gonna dive into what happened and what we can learn from this as dads. Not only as friends to other men, other dads, but also to what we can learn from this for our kids. And for those of you that haven't listened to the Daddiest Project podcast before and don't know what Daddiest is about, you can check us out at daddiest.com. Our vision is to help 1 million dads worldwide, just like you, master the most important project of your life, which is dadhood, with the 6 pillars of Daddiest, as explained in our book, the Daddiest Project, found on Amazon. So join the Daddiest movement today. The focus is building a stronger you and a stronger family, stronger future generations.
Yeah, we just finished recording with Raleigh, and it was an amazing show. We go into a lot of different concepts. The idea of how do men express their feelings and how it's different than with women. You know, how women express it, how we express it, and how you can lighten the load of others or have the load lightened for you. You know, we go into the concept of spotting. You know, how you bench press, and if you don't get a spot and it's too heavy, there's a problem. So we go into a lot of detail around that, and it is such a cool concept for you. If you're a dad out there struggling right now, all the way from, struggling with normal dadhood issues all the way up to contemplating taking your own life, I think this episode is going to be for you to have a listen and to share with your mates, with your dad friends, so you guys can do a spot for each other moving forward. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. Enjoy. Warning, this podcast may cause excessive dad jokes, sudden bursts of motivation, and the irresistible urge to high-five yourself.
Welcome to the Daddiest Project, where we help dads master the biggest and messiest project of your life, dadhood.
I'm Scott Batcher, recovering perfectionist, dad of one teenage girl, and a guy who once didn't sleep for 6 months straight.
And I'm Evan Hill, professional chaos coordinator, dad of 3 teenagers, and living proof that duct tape can fix a sippy cup temporarily.
Each week, we'll hit you with real talk, dad hacks, and the kind of inspiration that doesn't require matching socks.
Ready to level up? Let's build this dad life together. We want to welcome you and share a little bit to the audience as to why we brought him on the show today. Raleigh had done a reel about a friend of his, Johnny Clark, and I'll let you share more about it. But it really connects with Scott and I, with our mission with Daddiest, and empowering dads to be stronger, build stronger families, stronger future generations. And there's a lot of work to be done out there. And when I see a story like this with what happened to Johnny, and you being a close personal friend of his, it's just really connected with my soul. And I was like, I got to reach out to you and just see, if we can open this up and maybe help some dads not have the same outcome. So yeah, we're just going to roll with it. But I thought let's just start out. Maybe you could just share a little bit about, your experience with what happened, and how you know him, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'll start with the punchline, which was, so Johnny was my best friend. I'd known him for 4 or 5 years. We'd kind of connected over, we had shared a similar spiritual journey of kind of leaving the religion that we grew up with. I have 3 kids of my own, 11 and 2 7-year-olds. He had 5 kids. He was working at a big corporate job, and I had left big corporate America as a big corporate lawyer, and he had gone to law school as well. So we were just kind of going through the same phases in life, even though he was 5 or 6 years older than I was. And the punchline is he ended his life on January 5th of this year. He committed suicide. And we were actually working, him and I together, around helping men find the courage to be more vulnerable, to express themselves through art and writing, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
finding the expressive thing that they can do that kind of transcends economics. I think as men, we get put, especially men with families, we get put in kind of this provider and protector role.
Mm-hmm.
And when the protector needs protecting from some way, especially from their own hand. And really, men committing suicide is a men's problem. Generally, about three-quarters of the people who commit suicide are men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a younger man's game. Under 45 is where that tends to be a problem for both suicide, addiction, depression. That's kind of the demographic where it tends to happen. And both of us had bought into the American narrative for sure of climbing the corporate ladder, and if you're making enough money that it will insulate you from depression and this environment where everything on the outside is going so well. He was making
Mm-hmm.
high six figures, almost $1 million a year. He had a beautiful family. Like on the outside, it was all on the up and up, but on the inside, he had this pain that he couldn't ever kind of figure out. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what happened. He ended his life, and so that was very shocking. It's really the closest person that I've ever had in my. I've had grandparents that have died in
Mm-hmm.
natural ways, but it was shocking because in the moment that it happened, it seemed so out of the blue. And then as I talked to people, because I was one of the main speakers at his funeral, so I just wanted to kind of get the sense of the impact that he had of people's lives. And there were signs that I wish I'd paid more attention to. And so yeah, that's what the post was about, was or the reel was about, that men, I think when men find themselves in trouble in some way, or men who get to that state have kind of convinced themselves that they are a burden themselves, and they want to relieve those around them of the burden that they have become. And the reel is basically that's not true. And we want you here, and if men can find a way to um, get relief from that burden in some way, finding some safe way to do that. That I think that's a it's something that I don't think is talked a lot about me as an entrepreneur, and doing content around entrepreneurship for so long, that you can have all of the metrics that everything is going very, very well, but if your inner life isn't
Mm-hmm.
isn't going well, then that can lead to that disparity can lead to a lot of problems.
Absolutely. And something that really struck me when I was looking through Johnny's platform on Instagram, and him sharing his journey, and him going to, I mean, his story was that he was doing art every day as a child, and then he moved away from that, and went into corporate life, like you said, and had a family, and he wasn't doing that, and it was like he left the kid behind in him. And he was really encouraging other people to do what he did, which was to, like you said, shift and pursue something that was, what we would call in daddy is, more playful in life, like having that thing that you're doing that you really enjoy that maybe you had left behind. Um, and so I was left with this question, and also this observation that he was doing art and he was incredible at it. I also want to, in this moment, I want to pass my condolences to his family and his friends, and to you, for you to lose somebody so important. I can't even imagine the pain of that. Um, and it sucks to be in that position. And hopefully there's some gifts that come out of it for you. Um, and when I'm looking, getting back to Johnny and seeing what he was doing with his life and how incredibly talented he was, and obviously he was successful in his career as well, aside from that. And it makes me think, like, it's somebody could be enjoying what they're doing and be really good at it, but that's not it. Like that's not the recipe. There's more to it. And likely some things. Like, I don't know if you saw anything or you noticed anything, because you're saying like, I wish I had paid more attention to this or that. Like, was there any like subtle things that you look back now and you said, I could have dug deeper there? Is there anything like that that comes up for you, or were you completely blindsided by this?
I mean, him and I were both we we spoke often about our kind of mental state, how we were doing. We were both going through a divorce at the time, both of us kind of individually and in parallel. And um and so I knew that he had kind of struggled. He had had suicidal ideations in the past 5 or 6 years prior,
Mm.
and there were a couple times where like we would hang out and he would tell me about that he had been in a dark place a day or two before, and that he was happy that we were spending time together. And so um, I think I think a couple things that were interesting was as we started talking about, in my book where I talk about like how men find their purpose, the final stage that you have to get to is that of a child, because a child lives their life based on enthusiasm, and they're kind of doing they're doing their work that they find playful, and they're doing it for no economic outcome. They're just doing it because they enjoy it. And Johnny had really
Mm.
reconnected with that as his art. I think a a a mistake that he knew that he was getting himself into was that he started sharing his art as a way to just share, and then he thought maybe that would be the vehicle that could allow him to get out of corporate America, and so he started charging. He started taking on commissions, and it was no longer him drawing what he wanted to draw, but him drawing what people would pay him to do.
Hmm.
And that I don't think that that suicide's such a complex issue that there's no real silver bullet answer as to why. I think he was also at the beginning stage of some mental health concerns that were new to him that he didn't
Hmm.
really know. And I think I wish I'd pay more attention simply to the fact that he wasn't sleeping. Um, he would
Hmm.
stay up for days on end, and I didn't really know that that was happening until I kind of started talking to people who would talk to him at 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Um, and so I think in terms of a takeaway for someone who's not in that place yet and wants to avoid getting into that place is, um, I think your physical health is so important, and taking time to be in your body and to allow your body to rest. I think he felt this. I think he felt this deep, deep sense of exhaustion that he could never really satiate in some way, and he had kind of expressed that to some people that he never really expressed it to me, but he expressed it to some people that he was communicating with at the time of just I simply can't I can't find a way to rest. And then I think when you add substances, alcohol, some of those things into that mix, that can be a somewhat of an explosive combination that didn't work out
Hmm.
very well. I think I think the healthiest version of it for men is to find when you're going through a dark or difficult time, um, to if you can find an outlet that's not substance based, that's not mind altering based, in order to
Hmm.
find that peace and to share with someone else part of your heart, that can be um, that can be a beautiful and a life giving process.
I love that. Yeah.
So, what is the name of your book?
So my book is called The Creator's Call: How to Break Free from the Default Path, Find Your Purpose, and Unleash the Creator Within. I think, and I really wrote that book because I felt like I had transitioned through so many careers. I had been a big law lawyer. I had become an entrepreneur. I had sold that company, um, and I had never really found. I was trying to find what my thing was. And after I sold my company, my wife at the time was going through cancer treatment. My mom was going. I started to kind of have a lot of outside chaos, outside storms that um, making an extra dollar wasn't really bringing me peace the way that I thought that it would. And I was religious, and going through a religious practice, a spiritual practice, that just didn't seem to kind of quiet the anxiety and get me through the storm in the way that I thought that it would. And so I simply wanted to write a book that explored that question for myself of, why is it that I keep transitioning through all of these different things and nothing really seems to stick for too long. Um, on the suicide note, an interesting statistic that I came across was that one of the lowest rates of suicide is pregnant women. They almost never commit suicide, despite the fact that they're in an immense amount of pain, physical pain, but it's physical pain that's framed in massive meaning, meaning that the pain makes sense and they can make sense of their pain. And it's really a pain that, they're living out a true part of their nature, and so they tend to not end their life. And I think men tend to get in pain, and then they try to either work their way through, they become workaholics, which is something that I have struggled with in the past, or they become hobbyholics, and they just want to get out on the golf course and or drink a few cold ones with the boys and watch Sports Center and kind of sedate themselves out of, they don't do a good job expressing the pain, bringing the pain outward, and even saying to a buddy like, "Yo, dude, I'm not doing well right now." That's a and even if they say it to a buddy, most buddies aren't like, they're like, okay, well, it's your turn to hit the driver, so like, sorry, man, we'll see.
Yeah. Want another beer?
Yeah, there's not a great there's not a great ecosystem or community or anything like that even if you find the courage to say it, that you can say it and it kind of falls on deaf ears or someone who doesn't really have the tools to really help in some way. And so the book for me was how do you find your thing? And for me, the short answer is you kind of do have to go back to the forgotten child. And for me, as a child, I had a speech impediment. I couldn't say my R's. So I was Raleigh Williams until I was in like 6th grade.
Me too.
Hey, there you go. Scott Batchelor, though.
My brother was Greg, and he was Geggy.
Yeah. My dad's name is Gweg.
And now that we're talking about it, my sister, I had my R's and my L's.
Okay.
And my sister Lisa was Yisa and Geggy.
Yeah. Totally.
I have not thought of that for decades.
Wow.
I never thought of it until I wrote the book. And so what I would do two things. I would study, even as a 4th or 5th grader, I'd study vocabulary words because I wanted to like get a synonym that didn't have an R in it, so I could try to be understood. And the other thing is, when I had crushes on girls, I would write them letters, but I'd be too scared to give them to them, so I would write them and then I would keep them. And I had totally forgotten, and really even like when my wife got cancer, I wrote her a letter. Anytime that I had a very difficult thing that was difficult for me to express, even after I had, I didn't have a speech impediment anymore, writing tended to be the thing that I would use as the way to express how I truly felt. But because I was a good writer as a little kid, they would tell me that I should go to law school. Law school is a great place where if you're a good writer, you should either do English and so it became my profession. And once it was my profession, I no longer did it. And I mean, there was 10 or 12 years where I didn't write a thing to anyone because I was doing it so much in the job and the work, and I just didn't want to sit down in front of a blank page. And through her cancer experience, I kind of came back to writing as a way to just make sense of my thoughts once again. And I had totally forgotten about my speech impediment as well. But I think Johnny's story is similar, where when he was a little kid, he had a broken up family, and he would spend time at either of the parents, and he would draw as just as a way to pass the time. It wasn't necessarily this like deep, I don't know how to express it was just what he enjoyed doing as a kid. And I think if most men go back and they really think about, where did I spend that time? Where was my little escape as a child to kind of get out of my reality, whatever that was? For me, it was sports and writing, but I tried to go back to sports, and I thought I'd maybe be a professional pickleball player because pickleball is big in the U.S. And as I started to do that, I felt massive anxiety. I felt like I was wasting my time. Like this is not what it once was for me as a child, but writing ended up being that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of document my process and kind of my path out of law, and kind of getting back to that child place, which requires you to find something that's more important than the economic outcome that we as men are taught to totally frame in on, especially if you're in your 20s to 30s. You know, that is you're building your economic foundation for that you're going to enjoy or not enjoy into your 40s and beyond. And so it's very it's I talk to a lot of guys that are trying to find their thing, but they want their thing to also be their economic, they want it to be both things. And maybe it can be, but also I think you have to be okay that at the very beginning it likely won't be. And if you want to find something that you love, you should do more things because you love them, not because you love the outcome that they produce. And so anyway, that's kind of that's the story that I try to tell in the book, The Creator's Call. To be a creator again, and a woman is not creating children so that way they can go and work in the field. There's no end that you have a child for other than the fact that you want the child. And women have that out of their nature. Their biology does that for them. And I think men have to go on a bit of a hero's journey, a bit of a courage journey, because you likely will be very misunderstood, and you may get a lot of pressure for, you need to go, punch the clock. What are you doing drawing doodles at home right now? And so it will be a misunderstood process. And so I wanted to tell people how that came about for me, and to try to give them permission in some way to do the thing that makes very little sense on the very front end of it.
Yeah. My wheels are turning, Scott. You got anything you want to add?
I guess I'll ask the questions here. You know what I mean? Why not? I like when it becomes two-sided. Do y'all feel like that? Do y'all feel like that resonates for any way for you? Like as guys who are a little bit older than me, do you feel like this podcast is that, or the Daddiest project is that, or like what brought y'all into? I assume that there's a fair amount of heart in this kind of endeavor. What brought both of y'all to this, and if that kind of sparks anything for you from the child version of you?
Yeah. Well, Scott just wanted to hang out with me. So he's kind of just following along, but yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what you're saying is really speaking to me. And I'm thinking about my own journey as you're talking, and specifically like my experience. Okay, I'm just gonna like spitball this back. It's like it's coming and it's going. Like I get the thought, and I'm about to say it, and then I lose it, and it just happened again. Yeah.
So yeah, well, let's tell you a bit of the story. So you're exactly right. For us, we didn't come up with the name for the book or our whole concept for a few years into it. I started a podcast about 8 or 9 years ago, called the Wake Up Dad Show. And one of my first guests, I think Ev, was number 2 or 3 on there, because me and Ev went to chiropractic school together 25 years ago. So we've known each other for a long time. And I had him on as a guest, and I didn't realize he was doing dad stuff in the nutrition space. And so it was like, we're both doing dad stuff. Why don't we connect? And so then we became co-hosts of that podcast. And then I had the idea of writing a book. And then he wanted to hang out with me and write the book with me. It wasn't the way Ev said it. It was the way I said it. Ev wanted to hang out with me. And so we went down this rabbit hole. And then COVID hit, and Ev moved from Canada to Costa Rica and built a house down there. So we kind of took about a 2-year hiatus. So it's been a passion project of ours for a long, long time. And at this stage, it really still is just that, a passion project. At some point, we do want to get this bigger and start helping dads on a bigger scale and do retreats and everything down in Costa Rica. That way I get to go visit him and hang out with him.
Cool.
But at this stage, it's really been about connecting as dads and realizing that a lot of us have similar issues going on, even though we're all the way around the world, even though we have, I have one kid, Ev has three, et cetera, et cetera. Some dads are divorced, some are still in their marriages, some have got second marriages with extra kids, and all the different aspects of being a dad. But it really does boil down to what we call the P6 or the 6 Pillars of Dadhood. And we talk about the concept of you need all six. And I think when you were speaking, it's kind of that idea as well. Like for us, what you're talking about is what we call play. And that's the sixth P or the sixth pillar of dadhood that can be lost. You know, dads go into what I call a cave. You know, for first 10 or 15 years of dadhood, it can be you're stuck in this cave and you're wanting to provide. And that's where you see your value at. And if you don't keep the other ones on track, your health, your purpose, your parenting, your passion, we call it, or your relationships, and then prosperity as well. If you don't have all six going, then there's some kind of hole that needs to be plugged, and it can really start to dwindle and cause exactly what we're talking about here. We've got a whole chapter on fatherless kids and the stats that happen when the dad's not in the child's life, and it's phenomenally disturbing, the stats that are out there. And so that's why we have a passion about suicide, because as you said, it's a 20 to 40-year-old man problem, and most of those guys are going to be dads. A good friend of mine, as a chiropractor a couple of years ago, came completely out of the blue. He had a bunch of kids at home as well, successful chiropractor, and he killed himself. And it was just so phenomenally disturbing when you know a person. It's different when you just hear about a stat, but when you know a person, it's different.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally. And
for y'all, I guess I have another question, which is, do y'all, in terms of y'all's relationship with your own father, do you feel like, I would assume it's either you felt like you had that in a great way and you want to share it, or you felt like you didn't have it and you've had to learn it on your own and you want to have someone, like, do y'all connect over the same like relationship with your own fathers, either having it or not having it?
it's interesting. Like I had a good relationship with my dad, and then he died of cancer when I was 17. So I had both sides where it was, you know, I had a dad he was a provider and a protector. He wasn't so much like we didn't spend a lot of time together, but the pain that I felt when he was gone, like I still not completely, it's still there. I still feel the pain of losing my dad. So that was my story. It was really about the awareness that I had of what it was like to be fatherless, like what it was like to go through life without having that guy that was like, had your back for real, you know, like who else other than your parents and maybe your siblings have your back like that. And to lose that person is, you know, it was a huge lesson for me. So
Yeah.
but you, Scott?
Yeah, my dad still here, still in the hometown that I grew up in, and you know, we had one of those okay relationships, but he was very just your typical guy who didn't speak much, didn't talk much, no feelings. I think he told me he loved me maybe 5 times in my life type of thing. And so, yeah, for me, it was more of I wanted to be a better dad for my kids than my dad was for me. He did the providing and he was great. And we actually have grown a lot closer over the years. But, you know, my memories as a kid were a bit more of he was there as the provider and that was it. And so, again, that's part of where Daddiest came from, to look at all 6 pillars and go, okay, we want to be ticking the boxes for all 6 here to have the best life possible. And what we talk about is the idea of, how you've heard on an airplane, if those bags come down, you put your mask on first before you put your kid's mask on. That the more we started writing the book and realizing it's like, to be the best dad, you got to be the best you, and to work on yourself more than anything, because you can't work on other people, really. You can just be a better version of yourself and be the example for your kids.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, like the drive behind the book was, it was partially the experience that I had with my dad, but it was the experience that I had as a dad, where I hit rock bottom, and there was times where I felt like such a burden to my family that I thought maybe it'd be easier if I wasn't there, like to have those thoughts, and to be in a health situation that I wasn't sure if I was gonna to make it. I was like 36 years old. I wasn't sure if I was gonna make it through, and my kids were super young, and that was when I had these realizations that I had these holes in my bucket in the pillars. There was things that I was doing well, but there was 3 pillars that were just not even there. And so it was through writing the book and through those 7 years or 6 or 7 years of writing the book and actually putting those things into practice and having those all those things, having intention and actions and doing these things in my life, like it's made a huge impact for me. So now we're at this point of like having that experiential learning, and getting to this side of like my kids are now getting into the age where they're going to be going to university. And my son said to me last night, he's like, you guys have done a really good job. And I was just like, wow, like he brought me to tears. I was like, wow, thanks, man. Like, I really appreciate that, because, for a long time there, it wasn't looking like that. But yeah, that was the motivation for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I kind of want to kick back to this topic. Scott, you have something you want to say?
Before it.
No? This topic of women, and there's something about like the statistic that out of the 49,000 people that committed suicide, the last statistic for the US was 2023. That was when they had all the data in. It was 49,000 people that committed suicide. 39,000 of those were men. So it was 100 a day, whereas women, 27 a day. And I brought that up to my wife before we had this conversation, and we were just talking about it. And we were talking about that same thing that you were talking about, Raleigh, about the communication. And like even if a guy was, to say like, hey, I'm not doing very well, where's that going to go? It's and I keep coming back to this thing. Like, first of all, men, a lot of times they don't want to show their cards. And you brought that up in your reel, is like having the courage to say something. That's obviously got to be there. But most men, like, they don't want to show where they're really at. Like, it's whether they're feeling shame for their position or they feel like it's a weakness. But man, like, women, on the other hand, they talk about everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? They talk about everything. and it's like somehow they get into this thing about how things are going and all the problems that they've got going on, and then there's another woman who's, and they just commiserate, but resources evolve out of these things, and they share stuff with each other, and I see it happening with my wife and with women getting together. And I said, like, you were talking about the pregnancy element, and I was talking about pretty much the same thing, but like after the baby is born, my wife said, you cannot raise a child by yourself. you have to reach out for help. You can't do it. Like, you don't know what to do, and you have to reach out to other people that have done it and get that help. And then that creates community. And so they're hanging out together and they're going through this. And I think a lot of times, men try to tackle what they're doing on the problems, like you said, like using substances and just trying to like bore through the issue. And my question is like, what do you guys think is the reason for that? Like, what is going on there? Why do you think we're wired like that?
I think a lot of it, I mean, I think you learn your first model is your father. So however your father tends to deal with things, I think is the first that's like your starting path of how you either you want to be the exact opposite of your father, which is probably closer to what my dad did this. I want to simply do the exact opposite. If my dad's an alcoholic, I'm never touching alcohol ever, whatever. Um, I think I learned through my whole process, and then I think you begin. I talk about you start on a default path, and a default path is simply a path that you didn't consciously choose for yourself, which is you do it because you think it's the thing that will get you accepted in the community that you find yourself in. So for me, that was law. I was very good at school. I was pretty good at sports, and all of those things. I played tennis, which is a very individual sport, but I also played football, which is a team sport. But you're not. I don't. I think it's very. I grew up in an environment that it was very strange to ask for help is to fail. You've failed. You didn't do something right, or you weren't strong enough on your own. That was never like explicitly said to me, but that was just kind of like the understanding. Law school is a very individual game, where you're kind of competing. I think when you build a life around competition, and you don't want to give your competition an edge over where your weaknesses are, it's it it's very. I think for most men, their wife is a place that they can go to, their spouse. But then I think that there are some topics where if you tell your spouse, I really hate my job, a lot of times then that triggers your spouse in some way. And then you have their fear about whether you're going to be able to provide, and also your fear that is still there. And so it's like, if you get into the dynamic of I share something and then I have your problem now that I have now just created from me being honest, and then also my problem that I have as well. You start to learn, at least for me, I'll speak individually. I learned that it's better off. I have fewer problems if I just keep to myself, and I have fewer problems if I show up to help other people in their problems and my problems. I'm kind of a reader, so like if I have a problem, I'll buy a book about the problem and I'll just kind of try to mentally make it make sense in some way and kind of deal with it. And that worked pretty well until my wife had cancer, and until the burden of life just got to a place that it was unsustainable. But even in that process, I had to learn over time with failing through a lot of things that and I think sometimes, like if you have like your buddies from high school, you've been doing the same thing over and over and over again. I think I've learned that I probably have 5 to 10 men in my life that really, really know what's going on and that I can go to in a very difficult time. And I can tell, like, again, I'm going through a divorce process. Divorce has been harder than anything that I've, leaving the religion that I grew up in, becoming an entrepreneur, going through cancer. Divorce has been the creme de la creme of difficulty. And I have 3 or 4 people that I can really be like, like I'm not good. I'm not good right now. And it's okay that I'm not good, but I'm simply telling you that I'm not good. And then I have a whole group of other people that I just wouldn't ever tell the truth about, because they don't have the tool. It's not going to be helpful, and they're going to tell me things that there are some people where you can say, I have a load that is unsustainable for me to carry. Can you help me carry it? And they can be there. And one of the sad parts was Johnny was that in spades for me. And he was really the best of that in spades for me. Of I have this load that I cannot carry. Can you help me understand it or reflect it back in a way and kind of help me think through this? And really, what you need, or at least what I've needed more than anything, is compassion. I don't really need someone to solve the problem for me. I don't need a logical answer. I can get to all those on my. What you really need is and with men, we tend to address the problem and we want a solution, right? And we think that this is the way that we're going to be. But like, what you really want is you want someone who's willing to be, and you just want somebody to be like, damn, dude, like that's hard. I have no idea what to do, but like I'm so sorry that you're going through it right now. And like, what can I do? Like that has been that's been the thing that has lightened my load much more than, okay, so like let's write out what we're gonna say or what, like I don't need logical answers. And most men, unless they've been through it, again, like you said, your wife, you find yourself in a new community. I found that a man who's been through divorce is so much more helpful for me, in terms of just being like, dude, I've been through it. It's hell. I'm so sorry that you're going through it. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but like I'm happy to hear whatever you have to say. Men, we find ourselves in these communities too. They're just not as obvious as I have this newborn baby right here, and I need help from the other mothers. And you have to find the courage to find if you're an alcoholic and you go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, you found this community of, I've dealt with this problem too. Let me help you through this problem that I've navigated. But for men, you kind of got to raise your hand and you got to say, this is my problem, because you don't have this newborn baby in a bassinet that kind of, where women tend to, whether they say it or not, the women will all flock to the newborn baby. So that act of raising your hand and saying, I'm not good because of this thing, that's a massive act of courage, because men aren't taught to ask, at least I wasn't taught to ask for help. That feels like I've screwed things up in some way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you raised a good point there, that it really comes from, and a lot of it is what we saw with our dad and how they were communicating and dealing with problems. And I never knew when my dad was having difficulty, because he never talked about it. Never. It was, I remember, I think one time he told me, like, I think he raised his voice at me and then he apologized because he was stressed about getting ready for this conference. And that was the first time I was like, oh, like, it was like my dad was like the superhero before that, It was like, oh, my dad actually stressed, like, yeah. And then when he started getting sick and I saw that he was vulnerable, I was like, what? This is not computing. Like, he didn't even tell me that he was not feeling well. Like, it is just, and I think this is where I think there could be something that could be learned from this experience is that how we are with our kids and how we talk about what's going on in our lives, I think is really, really the lesson here, in that it's important to be open as a dad, to be open and talk about the things that are going on, and just like expressing, we don't necessarily have to be asking for answers, but I found this really works with my family. As we sit down, we have dinner together, and we talk about the day, and then I might tell a story about something that happened, something with a rental property, with a tenant or a guest or something, and how I'm going about dealing with it, or other challenges that are coming up, and a lot of times I'll just say, like, I'm not really sure what to do. And it's interesting because my kids, and my wife always has an idea for me. But my kids too, they come to the table with like, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And I think it's fantastic to have that dialogue. And I'm hoping that, and I think I see this in my son, is he's been talking about, lately, I'm feeling like last night, he said, I'm feeling stressed because, and then he went into why, which was because there were some things that were happening with his university applications and he feels like he messed up. And I can't help him with that, but I was, like you said, compassionate towards it. And I was like, damn, okay, like, what's your plan? And then he said, like, okay, well, here's my plan. I said, that sounds like a great plan. You know, and after that, we had this great chat about other stuff going on in his life. But it was like, I think that's the beginning of him, you know, showing what I think that we need as dads, which is to be open, to sharing what's going on. That's like putting our hand up and not just like carrying it and being quiet and thinking that if I say this to my family, I'm going to have more problems than if I don't, because that's that whole concept of like, you know, not wanting to be a burden to other people. And then also I don't want to have more problems because I shared it with other people. And that just creates this vacuum of like just us. And it's very isolating. And the answers are not in community, or their answers are in community, I should say. Yeah. We know what we know, and that's it. You know, it's like you got to look out.
I think even if one of the reframes that's been helpful for me, I've worked out 7 days a week for probably 15, 17 years. For a long time, probably 12 of those 17, I've worked out by myself. And there's simply weight that I will not do if I don't have a spotter. And when I have a spotter, so I'm right now the strongest that I've ever been. I can bench press 340 pounds. I weigh about 150 pounds.
Wow.
For the longest time, I was about at 295, 300 pounds, just working out by myself. But I'd never put that much weight on the bar because it's simply too dangerous. And it's like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But simply having another strong man there behind me as the ability to lift, and really the weight that we feel like we're dropping on to someone, you know, when I need a spot at 330 pounds, it's 10 pounds of a spot. But that 10 pounds of a spot while I'm lifting 330 makes all of the difference, because I then have the courage to put more weight on and to, you know, maximize what I'm able to do, knowing that I have people there that can lift the little bit that I may need if I ultimately bite off more than I can chew. But without having someone else there, I won't even make the attempt of biting off more than I can chew, because I know that I'm alone in the burden that I've decided to take on in some way. And so I would say, even for most men, I think when you hear it and you say you simply need the courage to unload the burden, you know, I think a lot of guys without context, they say, nope, not doing that. But I think if it can be framed in, if you find the courage to unload the burden, not only do you get help with the burden, but you can also do the thing that all of us really want. We want to take on as much burden as we can and help others and be the provider and be the best provider and lighten other people's load as much as we can, which is why it can feel so shame-inducing that we ourselves are incapable of carrying our own load. But if you can get right with your own load, which requires help in some way, then you can unplateau your own strength and your own ability in order to progress forward and be the strength that you need to be. And I think that's the framing of it that gets men in the right mindset of like, no, I'm not doing, like, that's a great reel, double heart, cool, but like, I'm not doing any of that shit because that sounds dumb. And I think that, and I've just noticed it in my own just physical exercising experience as a great metaphor for, I think men want to be strong, and we want, and you can be so much stronger if you get into the habit of unloading a portion and just having someone that can be there as your metaphorical spotter through the difficult times that you're going through.
I love that. That's
awesome.
I'd never heard that concept before, and that's
I think I made it up. I made it up right now.
So. Right now. Oh, even better. No, I absolutely love that concept, and I think it could very well help dads in the way that it's like, okay, if I have this issue that if I offload 10%, then it makes all the difference, and I can push through. I can get to the next set, the next day, the next whatever it is. When I unload, I'm not giving this other person this 100% burden. I'm giving
Yeah.
them 5% because that's exactly what a spotter is. When you're at that max and you only need I remember spotting Ev because he was a little weakling back in Cairo school. Come on, Ev, just a little pinky. That's all you need, and then that's it, just to get through that last little hump.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly
That's
right.
right. I feel like as dads, we're the metaphorical spotter for our kids as well, right? And to be there and to, I love that concept of that metaphorical spotter and thinking about that. Just that's how we are. We're there when they need that extra little lift. And there's going to be times where you're doing sets, you don't need that. They're going through life, they don't need that spotter in their life at that moment. But like when it's time, and that's the thing, like we got to be ready. And that's what that is about. It's about being ready. It's about being ready on all those areas, to be available, to have the energy, to have that relationship, all those things. So, we can get to this point where our kids are growing up and they can be the spotter, and they've got that relationship with that next generation and create, a healthier world. Really, that's the ideal, is what we want. But I gotta say, 150 pounds benching 330.
It's pretty,
solid.
pretty awesome. That is solid, man. I agree. Like that's over double body weight. I think about myself. I go,
that's
no, like
no,
not even close.
I'm strong at the moment. At the moment, I'm strong, and we'll see how long it lasts.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's good. Well, discipline is freedom.
Circle back a little bit because the stat you mentioned around pregnant women having the least amount of suicide. That might be a concept that we can use as men, more as dads, is that the reason why, I can only assume, is that, they have that higher purpose of birthing this child, bringing this child to the universe. And if we could, as men, realize how important we are as dads at every stage of our kids' lives, that it may help us to push forward and have the courage to call on a mate to take on 10% of that burden so that we can get through the next day and then the day after that. And then eventually things change and they become lighter and we've got sets that we can do. And for a period of time, that will be the case. And then there'll be another day that comes along where you're struggling with that set. And if you have the compassion and the courage to let somebody take 10% on, then we can be there for our kids. Because like I mentioned earlier, we know the stats of fatherless kids and they're incredibly brutal. And so if we could keep that in our heads as dads and realize how important we are, I think that's the key, or one of the keys.
Yep.
Yeah, I think and I think, suicide, I think suicide's interesting. When I wrote the book, there's, The Myth of Sisyphus was written by a French philosopher, Albert Camus, and he said that suicide is the only serious philosophical question that exists, because suicide is simply, it's basically the confluence and the constellation of, I can't make meaning of the pain in my life. What is the point of continuing onward, right? And so if you can get to, like with my best friend's story, it's simply like Charlie Munger has this idea of you invert the problem, right? What is the series of events that needs to happen in order for you to decide that you no longer want to live? And then just do the opposite of all of those things. Like Charlie Munger says, just tell me where I'm going to die so that way I never go there. And if you just can figure out what happens in those people's lives who get to such a state of desperation where they want to end their life, and as best and there's mental health issues, there's things that you simply cannot invert. What is the opposite of having bipolarity? You can't really solve for that in a massive way in your life. But I do think it's helpful to get to that. I think it's a helpful thought experiment for people to go through of what what leads someone to that place where the pain that they are experiencing. And I don't think, and it almost never is, I think that there are people that are objectively in more pain than my best friend was in, but something else, I don't think it's the amount of pain as much as your inability to make meaning of it and to frame it in some way. So for me, one of the things that's, my favorite quote is, it talks about the cave. It says, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek." A different type of cave than the cave that y'all are talking about, the provider's cave. And basically, the idea is that when you feel that your deepest desires sit on the other side of your biggest fears, and that a lot of times the thing you want most may be on the other side of some of the deepest pains that you may go into. And so for me, when my best friend kills himself, I think I'm just going to allow myself to feel this pain, because maybe this pain may be a signaling mechanism to the thing that I want most in my life. If I feel it as opposed to numb it, right? I'm not going to drink away the fact that my buddy's gone and I don't have him anymore, or I'm not going to numb it with any dopamine seeking activity. I'm simply going to feel it. And for me, so when my best friend killed himself, I sat in front of a blank page and I wanted to write about the pain that I felt. And then that's why that's why I did the reel. And I'm saying, I'm in pain. I want to share this pain in some life-giving way. If I can take this pain that I feel and reframe it in a way that gives new life to others, then I can handle a lot of pain, a lot more pain than I could have with a different mindset of, the more pain I have, the more I drink and whatever. I'm not bashing on alcohol. That's an easy, obvious one of like,
Yes.
that men tend to go to. But and that's been helpful for me as a way to kind of deal with the vicissitudes, the storms that I find myself in. If I can take this and then through my preferred activity, which is writing or just sharing, then it means something to me in the way that a woman's pain of pregnancy means something to her, The cave you fear to enter. Yep.
When I was, Insta stalking you, that's the one I screenshotted to talk about. So I'm glad you brought it up yourself.
Yeah.
And, it's true. There's another quote, I have no idea who said it, that said, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Totally.
I don't know who said that, but
I don't know who said it either, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something to keep in mind is if we can offload that 10%, I love it. That is definitely my biggest takeaway. I love that concept. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal it. I'll give you credit though.
Give us the credit, yeah.
Awesome. Well, great conversation, guys. I think, I hope that that the dads listening out there take something away from this podcast and look at, their own lives and consider being courageous in their communication. Ask for a spot, and you might need a spot it might not be 1 or 2 days. It could be longer than that. It could be weeks, and that's okay. It's not a big deal to spot somebody, really. You're not left in the whole load, but it's enough, to make that difference. And, I think about the close friends in my life, Scott, and some of my other close buddies. I'd 100% be there to do that spot, versus the alternative, which is that Scott might not be there. It's just no questions asked. And I think that's the other observation that I'm having here is that on the other side of the equation. So, right now in my life, I'm in a good space, and I need to be aware of the guys around me and what kind of situations they may be in, and to be curious and to check in with them and that sort of thing. Like, I feel like there's another level of awareness and responsibility because of what happened to your friend and checking in, and just seeing that just because somebody's posting stuff that they're doing and creating online and they have a big following and they're kicking ass at what they're doing, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing to what's actually going on inside of that person. And that's where that relationship makes the difference. Like, being with somebody and listening between the lines when they're saying what they're saying to you. It's listening between the lines and being curious, like, okay, like, what's going on for you? What's up? And maybe it's nothing, but maybe it's that opportunity to be the spotter. So if you're in a good spot, and be the, if you can be the rock for those guys around you, then go for it. I think it'll make a difference.
Yeah, I often, you'd mentioned it as well. When you hear of guys that take their own lives, it is often around that burden situation, isn't it? I feel like I'm too much of a burden to the people around me, and if we can just realize that people want to help, people want you to be there, and they want to be there for you as well, so that burden can be lifted by a spot. Again, I just keep coming back to the spot. I freaking love it. Raleigh, is there anything that we haven't talked about today that you want to talk about?
No, I'll just end with this. I think if you can find a way to both be, I think when someone reaches out, and again, I think we're talking about the most dire and the most desperate of circumstances, and most conversations, I don't think with a lot of buddies, it's not about I'm on the brink of ending my life or not ending my life. I'm right on the razor's edge of making that decision. But I think what I have found in my own life is, as I have learned to be, when someone shares a problem with me, or a struggle with me, I think what I try to do now as best I can is not jump to solutions, judgment, or shame. It's so easy, hey, I just keep losing my job. Well, yeah, because you stay up every night and you're on Netflix and you're, playing video games. And it's so easy to jump to the solution set and to be a place of judgment. And I know in my own life, when I know the people very well, and I know it subconsciously, I'm not putting out a list, but I know when I've shared a problem, I know who responds with wagging of the finger and, well, this is the way that this gets solved, or, you shouldn't have done this. And I simply will not share the deepest and the truest and the scariest parts of the things that it's too painful. I will not be vulnerable with them. Vulnerable meaning give you an ability to wound me in some way with judgment, shame, or giving me some solution that I'm not interested in. And so I think men I think men have a hard time doing that. A lot of us, especially in a married context, your wife has a problem and then you want to give a solution, so that way she lets you watch the football game. But but I think with men particularly, and really probably with your wife as well, it's so much better to just listen, and the way that you have compassion, the way that you sit with them in their suffering, is not try to in a way that's too early for them to be ready. Just listen, and to just say, "Damn, that's hard. What does it feel like? What?" And really, I try to, even with my kids, I try to ask more questions about their feeling and curiosity around the feeling that they have, as opposed to how are we going to solve this? The solutions come naturally. That's such an easy place for most of us to go. But just spend a little bit more curious time and doing it with yourself. A lot of time when I'm writing, I'm in my life right now, I'm going through probably the most anxiety inducing, I have probably 4 or 5 storms that have just built a a superstorm in a lot of ways. And I have the people that I share the superstorm with, in terms of how I feel. And then I spend some time by myself, like, what am I scared of? Okay, I have anxiety about this thing. What will it actually look like if my biggest fear happens? Let's play it out for a second. Why would that be the worst thing in the world? Could that be the best thing in the world? Whatever. And just, I think most men don't have we never built the skill of articulating our feelings in a way that women tend to be very good at. And the safest place to start is just on a written page, because it's just me and the piece of paper, and the piece of paper it hasn't punched me in the face just yet. And so just, I guess my last thought is, like, if you can learn to be a place of non-judgment, non-shame, and non-wagging of the finger, then you will find yourself to be a very productive and a very helpful spotter that is sought out by those around you. And I think that as you become that space for them, they will then become that space for you over time. And if you become the thing that you seek the most, then you can change your life, and you can really deepen relationships that you've had for a long time, by simply changing that dynamic of, well, do you want another beer? I don't, you're up for the putt, and that's my last thought.
That's a great thought. Yeah.
Great thought. Great way to end. Yeah. Well, on that note, I hope the best that these storms that you have going on as takes you to the place that, to the motherland, or whatever it is that you're trying to, it is that you're trying to achieve, I don't know, but yeah, I hope that, your journey is a good one, and, all the best. So it's been great connecting.
There's I think it's a quote from the Bible. I'm not really religious, but I do think of this often when I'm in a storm, and this too shall pass.
Yeah. 100%.
And it will, 100%. It's going to work out. It just may not be the way you thought it was going to work out.
Yeah. And if it hasn't worked out yet, it's not the end. It'll all be good in the end. If it's not good yet, then it's not the end. So
that's right.
Keep it rolling.
Awesome. Absolutely. I think that's a great way to end it for you dads out there who are listening and who are struggling. Reach out to a friend and just have a chat. Get a spot.
Yep.
That's another episode in the books, dads. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was dadhood.
True story. For more tools to build your best dad life, grab our book, The Daddiest Project, or join us at daddiest.com.
And hey, if you learned one thing today, you're already winning. Even if that one thing was never trust a 3-year-old with glitter.
Words to live by. Now go forth and dad like a pro.